Pawpaw Sammy and Alley Bug here. This video is strictly on your worm farm. I'm setting this up for a customer who called me and said he wanted to buy it. Okay. Number one, any container can be a worm farm. 5 gallons or 10 gallons, whatever, I'm not sure. 5-gallon buckets or whole wheelbarrow. Any container that you can put cardboard, paper, and worms in. Now, if you're inside, I never ever put a top on it. Never. Even in my big worm bin over there. If you're inside, you just drop this down on top of it, or your worms and your stuff, they'll stay. Now, it depends. If you're outside, I've been there, rats, coons, possums, will be in that bin eating those worms if you don't keep it covered. Can't be covered with a solid top. They just won't. They just don't like it. You need to cover it with a screen wire. I call it hardware cloth. It's a little 1/4-inch rabbit cage wire, 1/4-inch squares. That I'll do outside. Now, if you're coming inside, like I'm saying, cardboard you use for the bottom, right here. I don't know if you see the water dripping off of it. It's soaking wet. And that's for a reason. The worms like moisture. They got to have moisture to breathe. You see the corrugations in that cardboard? That's what you want. Some cardboard is real condensed tight with no corrugations. The worms get in those corrugations and breathe and live, especially if it's wet and damp like on the bottom. Now, I don't usually wet the top. I just throw it in there on top of the compost and let it alone. Now, if you're setting this worm bin up from scratch, I mean totally scratch, your worms are coming from somewhere else, you're going to need peat moss or the equivalent. You mix a little peat moss with shredded paper, with dry grass, dry leaves, make sure it's dry. Green leaves, green grass goes through a heat. And you don't want no heat on those worms. Not much anyway. Not in the summertime. So you use a little peat moss, shredded paper, and leaves and grass. You mix it in here, only 4 or 5 inches deep. That's all you need. Drop your worms in there. You wet your cardboard. You wet your peat moss and grass. Get it good and wet. Actually, you ought to let it sit a day or two, because that peat moss continuously draws up a lot of water. So after a day or two, it's pretty well soaked as much as it's going to soak. Now, people, I get questions all the time. How much do you feed them? Will a pound of worms eat a pound of food? No. Under ideal conditions, and I mean like in the average workshop, the average household, not some laboratory somewhere. Under ideal conditions, a pound of worms, which is basically 1,000 worms plus or minus, will eat roughly a pound of food in 2 to 3 days, under right conditions. Too cold, too hot, maybe not. Okay. They actually will eat their bedding, the grass, the leaves, the peat moss. They'll actually eat the bacteria that grows on those leaves and grass. So once your bin is set up and you get it going, if you keep it damp, you can go 2 or 3 weeks without feeding them. They'll eat their compost, their bedding. Now, here's the next question. Do you need 12% moisture, 80% moisture? Don't worry about all that. Learn your subject, worms. Red wigglers, night crawlers, or any other worm die when they get dry. You see them all over your dry concrete out there. They dead. They breathe through their skin and it's got to be moist or wet. Without that, they're not going to live. So what you do is let your cardboard, let your peat moss soak the water up. Then you pick up the peat moss and you squeeze it hard. And if it drops 2 or 3 drops, that's perfect. Now, if the water just pours out of it, it's a little wet. And if it don't get any drops at all, it's a little dry. It's not rocket science, people. Keep it medium to damp, medium damp to light wet. Feed them once or twice every 2 or 3 days. Anytime you smell an odor, you overfeed them quick. Don't feed them for a couple of days. When the smell goes away, feed them again. This vermicompost is totally 100% odor-free if raised right. It's the cleanest, sweetest dirt you ever gonna see. So now what I'm gonna do now, as I said, I'm setting this up for a client. So I'm gonna go ahead and set up on my worm bin and do the video on how to separate the worms and get this bin set up. Now, I don't have to soak in this particular one, my peat moss or anything, because I'm gonna take bedding out of the mama bin and put it in here. It's already been indoctrinated. It's got the micro, all the micro stuff's in it. No worry, it's ready to go. So I'm gonna set up and we'll take it from there. In this video, I'm gonna show you how to separate and get your worms out for your worm farm. All right. To start with, a Dollar Tree, a little Dollar Tree wastebasket. Now, I fed the worms the other day. I want you to see this. That's coffee grounds and coffee filters right there. I just dump it in here. Now, I don't know if you can see the worms, but they bukus of worms. Let me do it like this. I can shake off some of this. Now, when you're selling worms, usually they consider a half a pound of worms 500 is a half a pound, plus or minus. If it's little worms, it could be as high as 600, 700. And if it's big worms, like big red wigglers, it could be 450. But they consider a half a pound of worms 500 worms. A pound is 1,000. Anyway, that's what I do. I shake them out like this, separate the worms from the castings. Believe me, 500 worms is a lot of worm, people. 500 worms is a lot of worms. And the thing is, you want to give your customers worms, not bedding. This bin right here, oh, you see this? That's corn. That's an old corn on the cob I stuck in here a while back. It's growing. This right here, that's a big sweet potato. It's growing. I do believe that right there, I think it's a carrot. I'm not sure. This right here is an Irish potato. Don't laugh. I'll throw my peelings in here, and if it's the right time of the year, this corn will go in the garden. So is that sweet potato. But you know, they just when you do this, look at the worms. Look at that. Can you see that? Now, it don't take long to get a pound of worms when you start doing them like that. Look at that. Ain't one of them all. But I like to get as many worms and as less dirt as I can for my customers. Now, I'm putting, you see them. That's all grown worms there. No questions asked. Now, all these worms are adults. They'll be breeding like crazy. In just a couple of months, he'll have more than a half a pound for sure. But now, there's a trick to separating these worms. when I get what I figure close to a half a pound, I'll go over there on my workbench, spread out some plastic, and I'll drop these worms on it out of here. What's going to happen? They don't like light. Light, if you leave them in light long enough, they'll die. They don't like light. Okay? So what they'll do is, they'll do their best to get away from that light. So they'll go down. And as they're going down, you take a brush and brush the dirt off real gentle, and the worms will go down again and keep it. Pretty soon you have a little pile of worms. That's it. I bet you I got close to a half pound in there now. I'll know shortly. And shake around a little bit. You're going to get some of the worms to fall out. But when the worms don't fall out, you got worms. Now I'll go check and see. Let me get something to clean my hands right fast. I'll go over there on my scales and set up and see what. I have them dumped. If you'll notice, they're going down. They get out the light. I got a bright light right here shining on them. All right. I just take this brush and very gently sweep away the dirt. All right. And since this dirt is already charged with the microbes and bacteria, I'm going to throw it in the worm bin. That way the worm bin's charged. And you just keep very gently running the dirt off of them. It don't take long. In just a matter of a few minutes, if you'll notice, watch this. See the worms? They're going to go down. Just take the dirt. And like I said, when you get that many worms in there, it don't take just a couple of minutes of brushing that dirt. And all you're going to have is a pile of worms. They gone. It always fascinates me when I do it. Because it don't take, well, I'm going to put the worm in there with it. Anyway. And you'll have little worms. See how small that worm is? Little bitty things. Then you're going to have the big boys. But Red Wiggler has the big boy. Okay. But you just keep this going for a couple of minutes. And you're going to get down to just nothing but a pile of worms. And when you do that, you weigh them. Make sure you got your half a pound or pound, whatever you're selling. Take it from there. Ooh, look at the worm. They balled up in there. Like who'd have thought it? Anyway, they're kind of sluggish. It's wintertime. And I'm guessing it's 50 degrees inside. It takes a few minutes, people. But you need to do it right. You start cheating people, and it don't take long to get a bitter taste going. And one dissatisfied customer, one, and you just wasted years of your time building a reputation. So if it's a question, hey, I have been known if they question it, I just tell them, look, there's no charge, just take it. You wanted a half a pound, you got a pound, take them. I mean, because these worms breed, I raise some more. It's not worth the headaches of somebody being discontent. So I'm going to back off the camera for a few minutes and get this taken care of. And then when I do, I'll come back and show you how to set it up. Now, I took my time with a little brush. Like I said, you brush a little dirt and they'll go down. They don't like light. You just keep on brushing the dirt. In just a few minutes, look, this is what you got. And you see that? That way you're not cheating your customers. You're giving them everything you said they were going to get. Now these worms go right in there. Whew. I just wanted y'all to see that, because that's something most people don't show. You take your time. You give your customers exactly what you told them you're going to give them. And over a period of time, they don't even bother to ask questions. They just tell you what they want and they come get it. And actually, I've left it out on the sidewalk in front of the shed. They'll come by, pick up what they want, drop their money off and leave. And it's been good for me. I don't know if I've just been lucky with honest people, or the fish hadn't found it out yet. All right, now there is your half pound of worms. Right there. See them? Now that's the start of the bin. Now the next thing I'm gonna do is clean my hands. Then I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to finish setting this bin up. Now I've showed this a few times. This old shredder, I got it at a garage sale. Lord, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, $5. You go to the library, they throw books away. I collect newspapers. People, if you're an environmentalist and you don't realize how much paper that these worms can dispose of, you need to study that a little bit. My original bin outside was 8 foot wide and 12 foot long. Thousands of worms. I would go through 2 or 3 big black garbage bags of shredded paper a month. I'd throw that paper in there and they'll just eat it. Now, it might take a while if you don't have a lot of worms, but your paper's not going anywhere. The only trick on this paper, well, the way I do it, I take the book and the knife, if I can get you a picture of it, and just make a score. All right, that gives me 5 or 6 pages to run through the thing. Now, it's only going to cut 3 or 4 at a time. It's not going to cut up 8 or 10 pieces. But that's all it is, right there. Just throw it in there. And the thing, if you take this paper and a big wad and just stick it in there wet, a year from now, you're going to have a big wad of wet paper. You take this paper and you mix it with your bedding. Come on. You mix it with your bedding. Separate it. Don't let it clump up on you. If you do that, I'm going to just stop for a minute and show you. I'm mixing up some bedding right here. You put that paper in and you mix it. Kind of hard to see, isn't it? But you don't let it clump up, people. If this paper ever clumps up, it's going to be clumped up for the next 5 years. And you do that, come back, on a few more pieces through there. You don't have to cut it, just tear it. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you a trick. Tear it this way, see how it does? It just makes a mess. Tear it long ways, watch this. Comes out in a strip. Believe me, it took me a while to figure that part out. But people couldn't realize how much paper and cardboard these worms can and will consume. It's good for the environment and people. When you can turn this into this beautiful black, cleanest looking dirt you ever seen. Hey, I'm telling you, you need to look into that. environmentalists try and carry on. Hey, if you want to recycle, get your worm bin. And buddy, you can recycle paper, table scraps, cardboard. Now look, 500 worms is not going to recycle much. But like I said, you can have that bin as big as you want. Look at my old bin over there. I get rid of paper, coffee grounds. Wait, where is it at? What, 1 second. Here's coffee grounds from the neighbors. See the liquid in them? The coffee grounds and the coffee filters are in there. And I'll add some to this. Hey, put the whole thing in there. And those worms are very gently get in the middle of that coffee and those filters. Won't be long. They'll turn it into black dirt. And the main thing, there's no odor. Lord, there's no odor on these worms. None at all. Now, fix to get off this and finish setting that thing up for y'all. Okay, that's good. Like I said, $3 or $4 or $5 at a garage sale months ago. All right, here. Sprinkle a little bit and mixed it up. And I'm going to tell you something else. I get calls all the time, comments. Well, how come your worms are not trying to escape out of your bin? You don't have a lid on it. No. The only time this lid, if it's around me, is going to go on that bin is when I'm traveling. And if I'm traveling far, I'll set this in my lap and take that top off. Leave them worms able to breathe and they'll stay. When you open your bin up and there's worms crawling everywhere and all up and down the sides and on the top, you'll hear people say, well, they just going after the moisture. They're trying to escape. You put the top off, leave it loose, and those worms that's crawling around will stay in that dirt. They don't like light. Light will kill them if they stay in it long enough. Now, this is pretty well mixed up. Now, get this out the way. Get my coffee grounds out the way. Bring this back over here. Kind of damp, but that's nothing. So with these paper scraps in here, they start absorbing the water, it won't stay damp long. Now, see what we got there. Now, this I'll blend right in with the rest of it. And that paper I put in there, I'll make sure it gets dry. Now, this worm bin is basically finished. Like I said, I do not put the lid on these worms because they're going to try to escape. So what I will do is just right here. See that? Drop it. If you can see it, it's big. It don't even fit. That's all you want. Those worms will not leave this box. What can I say? Put that red top on them, tight. Come back in the morning, open that box. There'll be worms all up under here, all up under the top. It'll be all slimy looking. And you hear them say, well, they just chasing the moisture. They don't need to chase moisture. The moisture should be in their bedding, not up here. I'm telling you, leave that top off, people, and you'll never regret it. All right. I got that taken care of. Now, I'm fixing to set you back up. Okay, now here's the trick. This compost is wet. And one of the reasons it's wet, you don't harvest that much compost during the winter. People plant during planting season. But I've got an order for a gallon. It's really wet. And I'm going to show you how I harvest it. You drop it in this $1 from Home Depot. I'm sorry, Dollar Tree. And shake it. This is, like I said, a little wet, but it'll harvest. You take and dump the big stuff back in the bin, and you're left with the prettiest black dirt you ever seen. That's what it takes, people. Like I said, most of my harvesting is done during planting season. It's unusual to get an order this time of the year for compost. But this is going to a young guy in Baton Rouge named Jim, who owns one of the finest Mexican restaurants in Baton Rouge. And that's not me talking. That's the newspaper and everybody else. But he raises succulents. And he has some in his restaurant. And I was talking with him. And he said, well, since you have that, bring it to me. So I'm going to take it to him next week. But you see how easy it is to harvest there? It's no big deal. Now, I can't get over my corn growing. I wish it was time to plant it. I sure enough planted. All right.